Before we start, just a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. Only 2% are subscribed. At 1,000 subscribers, I'll be posting a special video. The monitor beeped fast as she reached for the door. Antiseptic stung the air, and my blanket felt like sandpaper. White light poured over the bed rail and shook my eyes. Her purse strap creaked against leather, and her keys glinted. I felt the stitches tug, and I froze hard. I am Alex Rourke, and I am 37. My mouth tasted like metal, and the straw squeaked dry. The four poles stood like a chrome tree beside my arm. Her perfume drifted sweet and sharp over the plastic tray. My chest thrummed loud while she looked to the hallway. "You'll heal alone," she said, and the door latch clicked. "Please wait," I said, my fingers slipping on the rail. "I cannot do this," she said, staring at the floor tiles. "Just talk," I said as the monitor beeped faster. Her heels tapped once, and the corridor swallowed them. A nurse rolled in a cart, and the wheels squeaked. Alcohol burned my nose, and the gauze rubbed my skin. "Your pain level?" she asked, fingers on the drip clamp. "Where is my wife?" I said, eyes on the empty chair. The cup lid rattled, and the room felt wider. The chair cushion smelled like powder and old fabric. A silk scarf lay folded tight with a loose thread. I lifted it, and the weave rasped against tender fingers. The scent was cologne I did not own or wear. I set it down and felt something tilt. The ceiling light buzzed hard, and the shade flickered. I watched dust spin above the call button and tray. My wristband itched where the plastic caught damp skin. I pressed the button and heard the bell crackling outside. I hated the sound of waiting in place. "Do you need anything?" the nurse asked, voice careful. "Water," I said while the pump hissed and clicked. She handed a plastic cup, and the rim felt rough. The lukewarm taste carried dust and a copper edge. I swallowed pain and heat and a question. The hallway smelled like bleach as a mop slid past. An orderly pushed a gray bucket and hummed under breath. The door stayed half open, and the hinge creaked slow. Light from the nurse's station bled a thin river. I watched the river and thought about vows. The remote lay near my leg, and its button stuck. I brushed crumbs from the sheet, and they felt like grit. My phone stared blank from the tray with a smudged case. No message lit the glass, and the silence thudded. The beeps counted seconds I could not hold. A wall clock ticked above a plastic plant and brochure. Each click pecked at me while the minute hand crawled. I smelled stale coffee drifting from a travel mug. The board listed my surgeon in neat dry erase lines. I traced the blue letters and felt smaller. The doctor stepped in, and his coat rustled softly. He held a clipboard that felt colder than his smile. "Procedure went smoothly," he said, eyes flicking to monitors. "Who signed me out?" I said, voice stuck in gauze. He checked a note and cleared his throat once. "Spousal contact left earlier," he said, shifting his pen. The air tasted bitter while the fluorescent tubes hummed. He tapped the clipboard and adjusted the stethoscope bell. "Rest and hydrate," he said with a tired nod. His shoes squeaked away, and the door sighed. I slid my hand to the chair and lifted the scarf. The silk warmed fast, and my pulse beat against it. A single blonde hair clung to the edge like thread. It gleamed under the lamp and felt wrong in light. I let it fall and listened to it not fall. The bedside drawer scraped as I pulled it an inch. Inside lay a packet of tissues and a plastic comb. One tissue wore a faint lipstick smear like a bruise. The smell of her perfume still hovered around the handle. I closed the drawer, and my thumb kept trembling. Memory flashed like a bulb, and the night got louder. Cold air on the porch and the railing under palm. A metal lighter sat on the table beside a mug. She said she needed air, and the door clicked twice. Smoke drifted sweet and wrong over the ivy. The curtain brushed my forearm, and the fabric felt damp. I shifted, and the tape pulled hair and stung. The four bag winked under light and hummed faintly. I gripped the bed control and raised the head slowly. Pain flared bright and cleared nothing. Her ring mark on her finger had been pale today. I saw it when she fixed the sheet by my knee. The skin there looked smooth like a band had rested. Keys clinked in her hand, and the purse tilted open. Something unnamed scraped the bottom like a coin. I stared at the doorway and saw my face in glass. The reflection looked thin and angry under hospital light. The trash bin held a crushed cup and a straw. Every sound grew sharp and pushed against my ribs. I knew I was awake inside something broken. I reached for the cup again and swallowed grit. The water tasted like the air before lightning strikes. My fingers traced the rail and felt grooves in steel. The beeping steadied while the clock kept drilling minutes. I pressed my tongue to silence and waited. The door nudged inward and hinges rasped like a saw. Steam rolled from a dented thermos and fogged the light. My blanket scratched my legs while the cartwheels ticked. My mom set the thermos on the tray with care. Her eyes searched the empty chair like it might speak. "Eat," she said, her voice low as the beeps. The lid burned my thumb, and pepper hit my nose. I tasted salt and metal while the spoon tapped tin. "Where is she?" my mom asked, fingers on the rail. I watched the clock blink and did not answer. She tucked a folded napkin under the cup's rim. Coffee smell drifted from her travel mug like smoke. A paper hospital bracelet brushed my wrist and rasped. "She called earlier," she said, staring at the floor light. "Did she say where?" I asked, throat rough with heat. "She sounded rushed," my mom said, smoothing the gown hem. Her ring clicked the bed control, and the motor hummed. "I will get fresh water," she said, reaching for the pitcher. Cold condensation slid down the plastic and kissed knuckles. She left the room, and the latch whispered like doubt. Rain tapped the window and spread halos on the glass. My backpack slumped beside the chair like a tired dog. The zipper teeth scraped as I pulled the mouth open. I smelled wet nylon and old coffee from a sleeve. Something hard hid beneath a folded shirt like a stone. I lifted a slim envelope with a blue corner. The paper felt waxy and warm from the blankets. Inside lay a thin ticket with black stamp lines. Our sweets shone in crooked ink under the lamp. The date glared up and bit the back of my tongue. My phone buzzed once and skittered against the tray. The screen lit cold and showed an unknown number. "Room is ready now," the text said without a name. I tapped the glass and felt grit under the case. I typed wrong number, heard the monitor tighten. Footsteps thudded outside and the curtain breathed in. A nurse rolled a metal stand and clipped a syringe. Alcohol bit the air while she flicked the barrel. "Any nausea?" she asked, watching the drip find rhythm. "Who signs visitors?" I asked, word heavy as coins. "Security desk tracks everyone," she said, eyes on lines. She smoothed the sheet and the cotton rasped my shin. "I can ask them," she said, lowering her voice carefully. The pin in her pocket gleamed under the fluorescent wash. "Please do," I said, gripping the rail like a handle. My mom returned with ice water, clouding the cup. The straw squeaked, and my teeth ached from the chill. She set a small charger beside the remote and slipped. "Your bag was half open," she said, touching the zipper. Her hand smelled like soap and something burned there. The envelope slid deeper when I shifted the shirt. My fingers traced the ticket edge and found a crease. The second slip hid behind it with stricter print. A credit card authorization fluttered under the pale lamp. 2 nights confirmed and a signature scratch hard. I dialed her number and pressed the phone to gauze. The ringtone rang flat and echoed in the shell. "Pick up," I said, breath fogging the black glass. Voicemail clicked in and her recorded smile felt sharp. "I need you," I said while plastic crackled like thunder. I pulled the charger cable and it dragged like rope. The plug snapped into the port and my thumb stung. The tiny blue light blinked against the tray's steel lip. My sister replied to my text with a single word. "Coming," she wrote, and the screen burned brighter. The doctor stepped in and closed the chart with a slap. His gloves smelled like powder and rubbed my wristband. "Vitals look steady," he said, tapping the monitor stem. "Can I get temporary clearance to step outside?" I asked. He studied my eyes and left without yes or no. I pushed the blind cord and cold light spilled wide. Street lamps smeared gold on the slick pavement below. A neon sign blinked across the rooftops like a heartbeat. Letters stuttered in the rain and painted the glass. I raised the ticket and held it to the glow. My mom's mug sat warm against the tray's lip. Cinnamon clung to the rim and threaded the air. "Rest now," she said, tucking the blanket at my calf. "I will stay," she said, settling into the chair's shadow. The shadow looked deeper than the gap under the door. The security guard appeared with a clipboard and pen. His radio hissed softly and filled the quiet blue. "You asked about visitors," he said, eyes on the log. "A woman left earlier with someone carrying a coat," he said. He tapped one line, and the ink bled like rain. "What time?" I asked, gripping the cup until it creaked. 10 past noon, he said, watching my mouth harden. "Could you see his face?" I asked, searching the page. "He wore a cap," he said, shifting under the lights. The cap felt heavier than the stitches on my skin. He nodded once, and the radio cracked with static. "Call if you need anything," he said, thumb on mic. The doors swung back, and the hallway breathed bleach. My heartbeat counted with the wall clock's slow tick. The envelope lay open like a mouth waiting. I set the ticket under the pillow and felt it bend. The fabric rasped over the glossy ink and hit it. Rain thickened on the window and blurred the city bones. The lamp threw a tight circle over the tray and cup. I stared into the circle and planned the next move. I swung my legs off the bed and winced. Disinfectant burned my nose and the floor chilled my feet. The 4-pull rattled as I dragged it toward the door. White light pooled under the threshold and trembled there. I pushed the handle down and felt every stitch argue. My mom slept in the chair with her mug clutched. Coffee smelled warm and sweet under the hospital glare. Her breath rasped softly while the blanket slipped from knees. I tucked it higher and watched the mug's lid wobble. I slid past her shadow and hated my own. The hallway hummed with vents and faraway cartwheels. Linoleum felt gritty where mop water had dried. I pressed the elevator button and the circle glowed amber. A soft bell chimed once and echoed down metal ribs. I braced on the rail and swallowed a copper taste. The doors parted and cold air washed my face. Fluorescent light flickered in the mirrored ceiling like lightning. I gripped the chrome bar and steadied the rolling pole. My gown scratched my back where tape tugged skin. I hit L and watched the numbers count like seconds. The lobby smelled like rain blown in by the doors. A vending machine hummed near a fake fern and brochure rack. Security stared at a small monitor with ghostly squares. The revolving door wheezed and left beads on the mat. I felt smaller under the atrium's glass and glint. My sister burst in with a soaked hoodie and backpack. Water dripped off her sleeve and splashed my slipper. "You should be in bed," she said, dropping the pack. "I found something," I said, nodding toward the zipper. She wiped her hands on denim and watched me shake. I tugged the zipper, and the teeth scratched my knuckles. Wet nylon smelled like a bus shelter after midnight. Inside lay a charger, a worn book, and a receipt. A thin plastic sleeve and under the spine like a blade. I pinched the corner and felt embossed letters bite. The sleeve read Harbor Suites in stamped silver ink. A keycard slid out and flashed like a fish. On the paper flap, someone wrote 412 with haste. The ink looked fresh under the desk lamp's spill. My pulse thudded harder than the machine behind me. "We go now," my sister said, tightening the straps. "You sure?" I said, tasting metal on my tongue. "You have answers there," she said, jaw set hard. She pressed a cold bottle into my palm and waited. I curled around the key and felt it chill deeper. My phone buzzed and lit the marble-like frost. "Use valet entrance," the message said. No name attached. "Head straight to elevators," it added, then stopped. The screen glow raked my eyes and blurred the text. I lifted the bottle and washed grit from my teeth. A nurse strode from the corridor with a clipboard. Her shoes squeaked, and her badge flashed under the lights. "You cannot be down here," she said, voice thin. "I need 10 minutes," I said, squeezing the pole hard. She studied my face and glanced at the scars. "Keep the line above your heart," she said finally. She straightened the tube and smoothed the loose patch. Alcohol stung the air while she pressed the tape. "Back in 20, she said, tapping the fork lamp. Her eyes softened, then hardened like doors closing. We crossed the lobby, and the doors breathed rain. Wind hissed through the revolving glass and chilled my skin. Taxi lights smudged the street and painted the tile. My sister raised her hood and lifted the backpack. I gripped the key and stepped into the wet night. A cab idled at the curb and engine heat rolled. Exhaust smelled thick and sweet under the neon wash. My hand found the door handle and slipped on chrome. "Harbor Suites," I said as my heart kicked twice. The key card pressed my palm like a cold promise. Rain hammered the cab roof, and the wipers drummed hard. Warm vinyl stuck to my legs while the heater roared. Streetlights smeared on the windshield like melted gold paint. I held the key card tight against my palm. The hotel sign flickered ahead like a dare. The valet canopy hissed with runoff and smelled like citrus. A bell cart leaned by the door with a squeaking wheel. My sister paid the driver and tugged my elbow. "Easy," she said as the curb splashed cold. I stared at the revolving glass and felt everything tilt. Inside the lobby, marble gleamed under a chandelier's white glare. The front desk clerk watched our wet shoes without smiling. A lemon cleaner rode the air and stung my throat. I raised the key card and nodded toward the elevators. We moved like shadows trying to stay thin. The elevator doors slid open with a soft thump. Chrome walls threw our faces back under humming lights. My gown rubbed raw against tape while the tube tugged. I scanned the card on a slot that flashed green. My heart kept time with the floor numbers climbing. The hallway carpet swallowed sound and smelled like old dust. Room numbers glowed faint blue above brass peepholes. An ice machine rattled behind a door with dents. For 12 waited at the corner with a scuffed lock. I balanced on the rail and felt the key bite. I knocked once and the wood felt damp from steam. A latch clicked and a chain rattled inside the gap. The gap leaked warm air that tasted like pepper. A man's eyes met mine over a crooked towel. The chain slid free and the room opened its throat. He stood barefoot with a wrinkled shirt half-buttoned. His watch face pulsed blue against the lamp's glow. Cologne rolled out thick and sweet over the carpet. "What are you doing?" I said, voice plain and hard. "This is private," he said, hand on the door edge. "My wife," I said, pointing past him at the mirror. He shifted and blocked, and the floor shook gently. "Wrong room," he said, trying a smile that slipped. My sister planted her sneaker in the doorway edge. "You heard him," she said as rain hissed on glass. The bathroom fan roared and steam lifted like ghosts. Footsteps patted on tile and a small bottle clinked. She stepped out in a robe with damp hair shining. Her eyes cut through the lamplight and pinned me. "It is not what you think," she said, too calm. "Then say it," I said, gripping the doorframe. Water beaded on her wrist and slid toward the cuff. She looked at the nightstand where 2 glasses sweated. "Give us a minute," she said, not looking at him. "Evan," she added, and the name hit like glass. He reached for a shirt collar and missed the button. The fabric felt slick under his fingers and jittered. "Do not be dramatic," he said, trying to laugh. My sister raised her phone, and the screen glared. "Lower your hand," he said, voice going flat. I stepped inside, and the carpet squeezed underfoot. A suitcase sat open on a rack with a tag. Room service trays crowded the desk with silver domes. Garlic and butter hung heavy and turned my stomach. The 4-line tugged and brought me back sharp. On the dresser sat a lighter with a scratched top. The metal winked under the lamp and pulled memory. I touched it once and felt the chill chase up. "Why is that here?" I said, keeping my eyes steady. She watched my hand and tightened the rope. "Leave with me now," I said, nodding toward the door. "The hospital is 6 minutes," I said, voice thin. "I need space," she said, holding the chair back. Space tasted like alibi under the humming fan. Evan moved closer, and the floor seemed smaller. "Stop talking like I am not here," I said. My fingers brushed the remote, and it clicked uselessly. The TV screen flashed blue and hissed without channel. She flinched at the sound and pressed her lips tight. "Please lower your voice," she said, eyes on the peephole. A folded paper peeked from her purse like a tongue. The purse strap creaked as she shifted in the light. She lifted it slightly, then set it down again. Perfume rose bright and angry from the leather flap. My sister saw it too and did not blink. Evan grabbed a jacket from the chair and fumbled. The zipper chattered like teeth while he looked away. "Do not make a scene," he said, eyes on the wall. "Tell me the truth," I said, touching the nightstand. The glass ring there shone wet like a moon. Silence spread until the fan swallowed our breaths whole. The lamp buzzed and painted her cheekbones in gold. Her knuckles whitened around the purse as if bracing. "I will explain tomorrow," she said, barely above wind. Tomorrow felt like a locked door with no handle. I stepped back and the door edge scraped my palm. My sister squeezed my arm and steadied the sway. Rain drummed louder against the window and rattled. The keycard pressed into skin and left a dent. I held that dent like proof as the hallway waited. I grabbed the purse and a leather smell rose fast. The strap bit my palm while the lamp threw hard light. Paper edges scraped my fingers like thin metal teeth. She reached for it and the robe belt dragged wet. I pulled a folded sheet free and felt the room hold. "Give it back," she said, voice flat under the fan. "Tell me now," I said, keeping the paper high. "Put it down," he said, stepping near the nightstand. The fan roared louder and rattled a loose vent. I opened the fold and saw gray clouds. The photo felt slick and warm under the bulb. Toner smell lifted as a white border flashed. Inside the grain, a tiny shape floated in shadow. A date stamped black along the bottom line. Numbers glowed like street signs in rain. "How far?" I said, eyes on the blur. 12 weeks, she said, knuckles tight on the chair. "Is it mine?" I said, throat dry as chalk. "No," she said, while the towel dripped slow. The word cut cleaner than the hospital scissors. Evan moved closer, and his watch beeped once. Cologne pushed heavy over the garlic from trays. "Let us be calm," he said, smoothing his shirt. "Do not touch me," I said, gripping the photo. The paper bowed like a blade ready. She reached into the purse and pulled a card. The cardstock rasped and flashed a clinic logo. Alcohol swab scent clung to the little print. "First appointment today," she said, pointing at time. Ink still wet kissed my thumb like proof. My sister opened the trash lid and leaned in. Plastic rustled while she fished with 2 fingers. She lifted a small bottle with a cracked seal. A vitamin smell bloomed sweet and chalky in air. Prenatal glared in clean letters across the label. 3 days ago, my sister said, turning the cap. The stamp on the lid shone under yellow lamp. Pills rattled inside like hail against a gutter. She slipped the bottle into her hoodie pocket. Evan watched her hand and swallowed hard. "You planned this," I said, staring at the dresser. Water beaded on the glass and slid in tracks. "I did not plan anything," she said, voice shaking. "I tried to tell you," she said, eyes on floor. Her breath fogged the mirror like winter. The desk phone blinked red and hummed faint. I lifted the receiver and heard a soft hiss. "Call security," my sister said, thumb on her screen. "Not yet," I said, lowering the heavy handset. Silence pressed in like a cushion with nails. She pulled an envelope from the purse and paused. Paper smelled woody and held a printed letter. "Results are here," she said, tapping the corner. She handed it over, and my pulse hammered. I slid out a page and met cold numbers. The letter named dates and measured small crowns. Fluorescent light glanced off the doctor's neat lines. Conception window stood bold and boxed in gray. We had orders from surgery to keep distance then. My fingers dented the page like a punch. "Why him?" I said, touching the room service lid. Steam ghosted up and carried butter into throat. "He listened," she said, eyes shaking on the lamp. "He was there," she said, barely above the fan. Evan stared at the floor like it might open. My sister took 2 quick photos with her phone. The shutter click cracked under the humming vent. She framed the photo and the bottle together. Screen light washed her face in blue and bone. She slid the phone away and set her jaw. "Keys," I said, palm open under the chandelier glare. Metal clinked in her pocket like coins in water. She pulled a ring of keys and let them hang. The cold weight brushed her wrist and made her flinch. She dropped them into my hand like surrender. Evan stepped between us and lifted his chin. His jacket zipper chattered in the buzzing light. "Stop this," he said, voice low and tight. "Move," my sister said, nudging the bell cart. The cart squeaked forward like a warning. She unlocked her phone, and the screen burned white. An email subject glowed with a crisp green check. "Lease confirmed for Unit 3B tomorrow at noon." Blue light licked the edge of her cheek. She tilted the phone away as if hiding fire. "You signed already," I said, staring at the door. Paint smelled damp where steam had kissed corners. "I needed somewhere safe," she said, hand on purse. "With him," I said, and the lamp buzzed louder. Her silence felt like a blade across cloth. "What about the child?" I said, touching the dresser. Wood felt warm and sticky under my palm. "I will keep it," she said, voice small and steady. "I will be there," he said, eyes finally lifting. His words hit the glass and slid down. The 4 pump on my pole chirped a warning. A sharp light blinked red on the little screen. My shoulder burned under tape as I straightened. "Time to go," my sister said, gripping the handle. Rain hammered the window like a drumline. I tucked the ultrasound back into the envelope. Paper rasped against paper like dry leaves in wind. The envelope went into the nightstand drawer. The wood swallowed it with a dull wooden sigh. I wanted it out of my skin. Contact me through a lawyer, I said, voice level. My breath tasted like metal under the bright lamp. Please wait, she said, taking one small step. Do not, I said, while the pump kept chirping. The sound cut past through her stare. My sister opened the door and the hallway breathed. Cool air slipped in and lifted the curtain edge. The exit sign glowed red across wet carpet. Evan grabbed the back of the chair and held. The chair legs scraped like teeth on tile. I pocketed the keys and felt their shape bite. Steel pressed marks into the tinder of my palm. Perfume still crowded the room like a storm. I touched the doorframe where paint peeled thin. Splinters caught skin like the truth catching. Get home, my sister said, shoulders squared and sure. Her hoodie smelled like rain and machine soap. She steadied the pole and checked the clamp. Ready, she said, I was never leaving them. I nodded once and swallowed the acid. We stepped into the hall and the light sharpened. Carpet felt thicker and swallowed our shoe sounds. The elevator bell chimed and answered without warmth. Chrome doors slid wide and showed our faces. I held the keys up and let them glint. Inside the car, the panel hummed under my thumb. I pressed L and watched numbers drain like blood. My stomach twisted as the line tugged skin. The ceiling light buzzed and showed every edge. I leaned on the rail and tasted copper again. The lobby smelled of citrus and wet stone. A porter rolled past with a suitcase stacked high. Wheels hissed over marble like snakes through straw. My sister waved the cab through the glass wash. Headlights painted us thin and bright. I turned once and saw the door close upstairs. A slice of yellow light vanished behind heavy wood. My chest ached as the pump settled silent. The ultrasound stayed hidden in the nightstand drawer. I carried the keys like a burning coin. The cab door slammed, and pain flashed hot across stitches. Exhaust drifted sweet and heavy through the cracked window. The seat belt scraped my shoulder and clicked home hard. My sister watched the hospital lights smear on wet glass. I kept the keys tight and breathed like I was drowning. The triage doors hissed open and bleach burned the air. A nurse grabbed the four-pole and steadied the metal. Back to bed now, she said, guiding me toward elevators. Fluorescent light washed the floor and made skin glow. I swallowed the copper taste and let her lead. In the ward, the monitor woke and started its beeping. A plastic cup sweated on the tray beside my phone. The doctor checked the line and snapped his glove tight. What happened? He asked, eyes flat in the cold light. I walked, I said, and the sheet felt like sand. My mom hurried in with rain on her coat. Coffee smell rose from her travel mug like comfort. She set the mug near the call button and frowned. What did you see? She said, voice barely above machines. I shook my head and stared at the ceiling grate. The night dragged while the pump whispered and clicked. The clock hands crawled, and the room held its breath. My sister scrolled her phone, and screen light pulsed. Lawyer first thing, she said, tapping a contact card. I nodded once and watched shadows climb the rail. Morning broke thin and gray across the blinds. Toner smell hit when the printer spat discharge papers. The clipboard edge dug my thigh as I signed slow. Someone should stay with you, the nurse said, tightening tape. I slipped the keys into my pocket and felt them bite. We pushed through the lobby and glass fogged with breath. A porter rolled a cart piled with suitcases and boxes. The revolving door wheezed and sent cold air slicing. My sister hailed a cab with one sharp wave. I leaned on the pole and counted my bones. At the apartment, the hallway smelled like wet carpet. A burned-out bulb blinked weak above the mailboxes. The lock turned slow, and the key teeth scraped steel. I stepped inside and heard the fridge hum low. A ceramic bowl on the table held our spare coins. Perfume still lingered in the entry like a ghost. Her scarf lay across the chair with a loose thread. Light from the window fell across the cracked tile. I touched the thread and felt the weave rasp. I folded the scarf and dropped it in a paper bag. My ring clinked onto the dish by the sink. Steel against ceramic sang and cut the quiet. Dish soap smelled like lemons and burned my nose. I set the dish deeper behind a chipped mug. The empty circle on my finger pulsed like a bruise. A stack of mail slumped near a magnet and pin. I tore a bill open and felt the paper drag. Ink smeared under my thumb in the white light. My sister filled a small suitcase with folded shirts. The zipper sounded final and sharp as a zip tie. We called a locksmith, and the drill whined hard. Oil smell rose as he swapped the cylinder clean. Shavings glittered on a mat beside the door. "You are good now," he said, wiping his hands. The new key teeth flashed like fresh edges. She texted while the drill dust settled in lines. "Need to pick up things," she wrote. "Make it easy." My phone vibrated on the counter beside the sponge. "Lawyers only," I wrote, screen bright against dim cabinets. The bubble sat there and did not answer. I filled a cardboard box with framed photos and books. Dust floated like ash under the kitchen light. The glass of one frame squeaked under my palm. I turned it face down and felt my throat tighten. The table creaked as the box swallowed more years. My mom stirred a pot and garlic filled the room. Steam fogged her glasses while the wooden spoon tapped. "Eat a little," she said, placing a bowl down. The ceramic warmed my hands and steadied the shake. I sipped and walked back to the window glare. A knock hit the door like a hammer on steel. Footsteps shuffled, and water dripped onto the mat. My sister checked the peephole and raised an eyebrow. "Building security," she said, hand on the chain. I opened slowly and met a nylon jacket. "We served a notice from management today," he said. Paper crinkled as he handed a sealed envelope. The hallway light flickered and buzzed above his cap. "Noise complaints last night," he said, voice bored. He left the smell of wet wool and hallway dust. I slit the envelope with a butter knife's edge. The blade scraped, and the flap curled like bark. Typed lines warned about guests and after-hours visits. I set the letter under the salt shaker for now. A siren faded somewhere and left the kitchen thinner. The lawyer answered on the third ring with static. Her voice sounded dry and calm through the speaker. "Document everything," she said, while papers shuffled. I wrote on a yellow pad with a dull pencil. Graphite smeared my finger and made gray crescents. "File for separation today," she said, crisp and clear. "I need the lease and any records," she said. The pen scratched while my sister pulled a folder. The folder smelled like cardboard and office glue. We stacked our proof on the table like bricks. We rode the elevator down, and the cables hummed. My coat scraped the wall and left a faint line. Outside, cold light bounced off puddles and chrome. A bus wheezed past and splashed grit onto shoes. I tucked the keys deeper and watched my breath. The courthouse lobby smelled like paper and old polish. A metal detector beeped as a tray swallowed my phone. The clerk slid forms under glass and tapped a stapler. Her nails clicked, and her perfume lifted like powder. "Sign here," she said, pointing with a red pen. I pressed the pen and felt the barrel warm. The stamp thumped hard and left a blue seal. Fluorescent lights hummed over rows of plastic chairs. A wall clock ticked and dragged the second hand. I carried the stamped forms like a shield. Back home, the radiators hissed and thumped the pipe. Heat smeared the windows and blurred the street shape. My mom placed a folded blanket on the couch. Wool scratched my wrist and felt like armor. I leaned back and listened for unwelcome tires. Her text blinked again, and then another arrived. "I need 10 minutes," she wrote. "Only a bag." I looked at the cardboard box by the door. The box sagged and showed the corner of a frame. My sister typed a reply and closed the thread. Evening fell, and the lamps turned to room gold. Soup bowls cooled beside 2 spoons on the counter. The house smelled like broth and laundry in rain. We spoke quietly and kept the TV black. The phone on the table felt like a detonator. Another knock, softer this time, barely a tap. I breathed in and tasted dust on the air. My sister checked the peephole and shook her head. "Not them," she said, and opened for the courier. A manila envelope slid through like a verdict. The envelope crackled and resisted under my thumb. Inside lay temporary orders and a court date. The paper edges rasped and caught on rough skin. Light pooled on the seal like a small spotlight. I set the package near the radio and exhaled hard. Night deepened and the fridge hummed steady and low. I changed the gauze and winced at the tape pull. Alcohol stung, and the cotton pad turned pink. I dropped the used strip into a tin trash can. The lid clanged and jarred me back upright. I filled a glass with water and heard it splash. The faucet squealed and shuddered as it shut. The rim cooled my lip and steadied the shake. Streetlight cut a thin bar across the sink. The keys glinted there like small, cold teeth. My sister laid out pills beside the timer. The bottle clicked and rolled once on the table. "Take these and sleep," she said, tapping the cap. Her voice trimmed the room down to something manageable. I swallowed and listened to the apartment breathe. I placed the scarf bag on the shelf by the door. Paper whispered and perfume leaked a faint echo. The shelf wobbled under the weight and settled. I stared until the bag blurred in the dim. Return later, I thought, with witnesses and daylight. Rain eased and left the city soft and wet. Headlights slid across the ceiling like slow fish. The radiator ticked small clicks in the corner. I set the new keys flat on the table. Morning would find them waiting in a clean line.